Okay, another way to find the x-intercepts is a method called the square root method. Now this method only works, and it only works if there is no x term, if there is no bx term, okay? So if you see ax squared plus c, or this could be plus or minus c, not necessarily plus c, but if you see ax squared plus or minus c equal to 0, then this method will work. So what we're going to try and do is isolate x squared. That means get x squared by itself and then move the constant over to the other side. For instance, on this one, we want to get x squared by itself, we're going to add 49, which ultimately we're still solving for x. It's just a different method. So we have x squared equals 49. And now we're going to take the square root of both sides. So I take the square root of x squared and I take the square root of 49. So the square root of x squared is just x. And the square root of 49, now, in past times, we have focused on just the positive side of a square root. Like the square root of 49 is 7. But what we don't realize that, yes, 7 times 7 is 49, but the negative side of that, negative 7 times negative 7 is also 49. So you're going to see your answers written as the positive or negative 7. Because positive 7 times positive 7 is 49, and negative 7 times negative 7 is 49. So there are actually two answers there. So let's just start simple. Number 1, okay, there is no x term, so this works. To get x squared by itself, we're going to add 16. And so x squared equals 16. We're going to take the square root of both sides. So the x squared of x squared is x, and the square root of 16, yes, it is 4, but not just positive 4, negative 4 as well, because 4 times 4 is 16, and negative 4 times negative 4 is 16 as well. So just keep that in mind. Number 2, to solve for x squared, we're going to add 100 to both sides. So x squared equals 100. We're going to take the square root of both sides. So x equals positive and negative 10. Because the square root of 100 is 10. Here, to solve for x squared, we are going to subtract 25 and minus 25 to both sides. X squared equals negative 25. Now, when this happens, this one would actually be no solution, because when I take the square root of negative 25, there is no number times itself that will give me a negative 25, because 5 times 5 is positive 25, and negative 5 times negative 5 is also positive 25. So when you get in a solution or a question like this where it's a negative perfect square, it's actually no solution as your answer. Number 4, okay, we still have to set x squared by itself. So in order to get x squared by itself, we're going to subtract 7. So x squared equals 88 minus 7 is 81. Now we can take the square root of 81, and that means the square root of 81 is positive or negative 9. Number 5, to solve for x squared, we're going to subtract 7. So x squared equals negative 3. This is one of those where there is no solution, because the square root of negative 3 is not possible. So this one's no solution as well. And let me clarify what I mean by no solution. Like we've seen in past few days on these, what it means by no solution is that it's not going to cross the x-axis at all. Like it'll go above it or it'll go below it, but it won't actually touch or cross. So that's what I mean by no solution. Like it's just not going to touch the x-axis. Number 6, to solve for x squared, we're going to add 5. So x squared equals 1, okay? And so when I take the square root of 1, x equals positive and negative 1, because positive 1 times positive 1... Because positive 1 times positive 1 is 1, and negative 1 times negative 1 is also 1, so there's my answer. Okay, number 7, to get x squared by itself, we're going to divide by 6 here. So x squared equals 9. The square root of 9 is positive and negative 3. Number 8, to get x squared by itself, we're going to divide by -2. So x squared equals, let's see, my mental math right now is not working, so I'm trusting my handy-dandy calculator, is positive 49. The square root of 49 is positive and -7. Okay, number 9, to get x squared by itself, we would divide by 3/4, which is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal of 4/3. So x squared equals 12 times 4/3 is, that's 16. The square root of 16 would be positive and -4. Number 10, to solve for x squared, this requires 2 steps. So we're going to add 5 first, where we have 1/2 x squared equals 50. Then we're going to divide by 1/2, which is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So x squared equals 100. The square root of 100, which we've already seen at the front, at the beginning, was positive and -10. Number 11, I'm going to divide by 3. So x squared equals 432 divided by 3 is 144. The square root of 144 is positive and -12. Number 12, to solve for x squared, we're going to divide by -4. So x squared equals 4. The square root of 4 is positive and -2. Okay, just to keep more practice, number 13, to solve for x squared, we're first going to add 108 to both sides, where we have 3x squared equals 108. We're going to divide by 3. So x squared equals 108 divided by 3 is 36. The square root of 36 is positive and -6. 14, we're going to first add 45, where I have 5x squared equals 45, and then we're going to divide by 5, where x squared equals 9. The square root of 9 is positive and -3. Number 15, we're going to add 3. So 1/2 x squared equals 32. Then we're going to divide by 1/2, which is the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal of 2 over 1. So x squared equals 32 times 2 is 64. The square root of 64 is positive and -8. 16, to solve for x squared, we're going to add 16 first and have 9x squared equals 16. We're going to then divide by 9, so we have x squared equals 16 over 9 does not simplify, but oddly enough, if you look at both 16 and 9, both of those terms are perfect squares. So if I take the square root of this, my answer, it's oddly enough, is positive and -4/3, because the square root of 16 is 4 and the square root of 9 is 3. So it is possible to get some strange answers like that. Number 17, to solve for x squared, we're going to add 1. So 4x squared equals 25, where we're then going to divide by 4. So x squared equals 25 over 4. And if you look closely again, 25 and 4 are perfect squares. So when I take the square root of that, it's going to be positive and -5 over 2, because the square root of 25 is 5 and the square root of 4 is 2. So odd, but pretty neat. Number 18, we're going to subtract 16. 49x squared equals 8 minus 16 is -8. Then we're going to divide by 49. Now this time, this one wouldn't have any solutions because 49 is a perfect square, but 8 is not. And then also if you consider this -8, there's no number times itself that is going to be -8. So this one would be one of those that would be no solutions. Number 19, one of these as well. It's already set equal to x squared. When I take the square root of 19, there is no number times itself that is going to be 19. So this one would be no solution. Okay, so I do take that back because that is not true. So when it comes to, not all answers or not all questions are going to have perfect squares. So on these, when it comes to that case, as long as it's a positive number, So like if it was negative 19, there's no way. There's no way for me to take the square root of a negative number because there's no number times itself that is going to give me negative. But when it's positive, we just have to consider that it's going to be irrational in a case like this. So what I mean by that, if you remember back a couple units back where we had to simplify radicals, okay, when I take the square root of 19, and 19 actually doesn't work either. So what I'm going to have to do is take the square root of 19 on my calculator, and I'm going to get a long and crazy decimal. So my answer for this one is going to be plus or minus 4, and we're just going to round, but it would be 4.4-ish. So number 20, to solve for x squared, we're going to add 41. So x squared equals 41. Again, because it's positive, it does have a number that multiplies times itself to get 41. So we're going to take the square root of 41 in my calculator. And we get 6. So x would be positive negative 6.4. Okay, continuing that, to get x squared by itself on 21, we're going to subtract 5. So x squared equals 12. Taking the square root of 12, we're going to have to just take the square root of 12. And we have 3.5, so positive negative 3.5-ish, because it is an irrational number. Number 22, we're first going to add 126, and then after we add 126, we're going to divide by 2. So x squared equals 63. Again, 63 is not a perfect square, but the square root of 63 is roughly 7.9. 23, the only thing to do is subtract or divide by 36. Before I check to see if it simplifies, if you look carefully, 100 and over 36, they are both perfect squares like we saw earlier. So this one actually does have the square root of 100 over 36 is 10 over positive and negative 10 over 6, because the square root of 100 is 10 and the square root of 36 is 6. Okay. Number 24, the first thing we need to do is add 6. So negative 8x squared equals negative 24. Then we're going to divide by negative 8. So x squared equals negative 3, or positive 3, sorry. Since it is positive, I can take the square root of 3, which would end up with long and crazy positive and negative 1.7-ish. 25, I'm going to subtract 2, so 1/3 x squared equals 12. Dividing by 1/3 is the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal, which is 3 over 1. So x squared equals 36. This one is a perfect square, so the square root of 36 is positive and negative 6. 26, I'm going to add 1, so it's 4/5 x squared equals 8. Dividing by 4/5 is the same thing as multiplying by 5/4. So x squared equals 10. Yeah. So the square root of 10 is not a perfect square, but the square root of 10 would be positive and negative 3.2-ish. Okay, number 27. So I have a choice here, but it's a messy choice. If I decide to distribute this 3/4, I know that 17 and 3/4 will not simplify. So I'm going to do the opposite, and I'm going to get rid of the fraction first. To get rid of the fraction, I'm going to divide by 3/4, which is the same thing as multiplying by 4/3. So I have x squared minus 17 equals 8. Then I'm going to add 17 to that. So I have 25. The square root of 25 is a perfect square, so the square root of 25 is positive and negative 5.